Hi, Clint Coons here with Anderson Business Advisors. And there's a topic that comes up quite a bit when I'm dealing with individuals whom I meet when I'm teaching an asset protection event, or maybe I'm at someone's real estate investing seminar and people hear that I'm an attorney and they come up to me and they ask me a question such as, how do you find a good asset protection attorney? Now, you may have experienced this. Your local area, there's a lot of attorneys out there, but you don't know if they truly understand asset protection, or more importantly, do they understand your business and what those needs are when it comes to asset protection planning. And I can tell you, a lot of attorneys will tell you they understand asset protection, but when you get down to the crux of it, their strategies are outdated, too simplified, or just won't protect you the way you need to be protected. So when it comes to selecting an asset protection attorney, the first thing you want to know or ask of that individual is, what is their experience, especially when it comes to your type of protection? For instance, let's assume that you're in real estate investing. You should ask that attorney, how many real estate investors have you worked with? Have any of your real estate investors been sued? What has been the outcome of those lawsuits? More importantly, I would ask the attorney, are you a real estate investor? What have you done for your real estate investing? These are very important questions because it will give you some insight into the attorney and how that attorney sets up the structures for those clients. I'd also ask the attorney whether or not that attorney works with a CPA. From the standpoint is the attorney going to help you with your taxes, or is that attorney going to then throw you off to another individual to deal with the tax issues related to the structure the attorney has created for you? You see, this is oftentimes a problem. You're working with one professional who creates part of the structure and then recommends you talk to a CPA to finalize that structure. Well, if they're not on the same sheet of music, then you're probably going to run into problems down the road, because the CPA doesn't necessarily understand what the attorney's doing, and the attorney doesn't necessarily understand what the CPA is looking at. So you would prefer to keep all of that in-house. You would want your attorney also assisting you with the taxation of the structure you're creating. Because at a bare minimum, you want them to understand the nature of the entity they're creating and how it will impact you from a tax standpoint. Because when it comes to selecting an asset protection attorney and in choosing the right structure, certain structures can have negative tax implications for the particular type of activity you're engaging in. For example, I know of two real estate investors that went to an attorney to set up a structure to protect themselves from their investing. Well, that attorney created a limited liability company for them and chose to have it taxed as a partnership. Well, that information is accurate. You can use an LLC and it will provide asset protection from inside liabilities. And choosing partnership taxation is one way of choosing to have LLC tax to split the profits amongst the individuals. But you also have to look at the underlying activity, what it is that they're doing. And in this case, by having the LLC set up to be taxed as a partnership, you just increased the taxation on the individual members. A different form of structure would have been more appropriate for that underlying activity for those two individuals. But the asset protection attorney that they were working with didn't fully understand the nature of the business and the tax ramifications of the structure that was recommended. So when you're dealing with an asset protection attorney, you want to make sure that they're fully versed in your particular activity. I often call this, you want to make sure that the structure is relevant to your investing. It's not just accurate, but it's relevant, so that there aren't any things that will come up later on down the road and subject you to increased taxation, or possibly hurt your overall ability to further engage in business planning, because a structure that was created for you is inflexible. So when I look at structures and I'm creating those for our clients here at Anderson, one of the things we always focus on is flexibility. Are we creating a structure that will allow our clients to utilize their business in the manner they want to utilize it, so we're not tying their hands? So down the road, if something were to happen, they could easily shift what they're doing and not be tied up or have their assets tied up. For example, I'm going to share with you a strategy now that has to do with LLCs and how you create them or how you protect them. If you're working with an asset protection attorney, they should be familiar with the use of holding LLCs. Now, this is just an LLC that is designed to hold your various business interests. Now, some attorneys might tell you that that's an unnecessary expense. Why go to the trouble to create an additional limited liability company to hold all your various other LLCs that you've set up for your investing activities? Well, I look at it as, again, flexibility planning, planning for the unknown, to ensure that if something does happen and I'm involved in a lawsuit, that my assets aren't necessarily going to be tied up and prevent me from continuing on with my way of business that I've been accustomed to conducting. For example, let's assume that you're working with an attorney and they suggest that you create LLCs for your various ventures like this. So you have several LLCs set up, and let's assume that they own real estate like that. And maybe you have another LLC over here that owns cash for investing, maybe doing hard money lending, something of that nature. Now, a lot of attorneys will tell you, well, you're down here, you should own all of these interests in your own name. So you're going to be the member in your LLCs. That's accurate information. You can be the member in your own limited liability companies. But I would want to put to you, what would happen if you're involved in a lawsuit? We know that these LLCs are going to protect you from any claims that are brought against the limited liability companies. That's why they're there. But oftentimes we don't pay attention to what happens when you're sued individually. If somebody brings a claim against you personally for something you've done, how will that impact these LLCs that are set up? Well, it's going to depend on the nature of the claim and if a judgment's entered against you. If a judgment is entered against you, and let's assume that it's for $500,000, one benefit of limited liability companies that are set up in the right state is that you have charging order protections, meaning that if somebody sues you, they cannot take these various interests. Now, LLCs and choosing the appropriate jurisdiction is very important when it comes to asset protection planning. Oftentimes we set up LLCs where the property is located, using property as the example. Let's say this was a California LLC, this was a Utah LLC, this was a Florida LLC, and this one over here was a Georgia LLC because I live in Georgia. Now, in this particular structure, you do not have charging order protections for any of those limited liability companies. So the asset protection attorney who created this for you, yes, they gave you protection from the assets themselves. So if something happens here, you're not going to get sued. But they didn't give you protection is that if you get sued individually, because maybe your child went out there and was speeding and hit someone. And so now you're being sued as a result of your child's negligence when they were driving. Judgments entered against you for $500K, you could lose the interest in this LLC, this LLC, this LLC, and this LLC because all of these states allow a creditor to take your interest from you. Now, another thing to consider is what would happen if you didn't have LLC set up in the state. Maybe you have the LLC set up in a state that offers great asset protection, or what we call charging order protection. So this is in Texas. This one over here was in Arizona. And this one over here is Wyoming. And this one is also Wyoming. So now you have states that offer great charging order protections, meaning that if you get sued, they can't take your LLC interests. So now you think you're safe. You're like, I have inside protection, so if something happens on the inside, they can't sue me. And if something happens on the outside and I'm sued, they can't take my LLCs from me. Where do I need to go from here? I'm just going to keep this structure in place. Well, again, this comes down to understanding how a lawsuit would affect your business. If you haven't been involved with clients that have dealt with this, you're not, as an asset protection attorney, going to see where the risk lies with this type of structure if you just stop here. What you should do is create a holding LLC to own these interests. So what we would do is take you out of the picture here and replace you with a limited liability company such as a Wyoming LLC, and have all of these limited liability companies owned by the Wyoming LLC, and then you'll be down here owning this. The reason being is that if you were sued here and then you didn't have this Wyoming LLC and they put a charging order on this LLC, this LLC, this LLC, and this LLC, then you couldn't take the assets out of here down to yourself without having to pay off your creditor. Now that can put a problem in your business. Let's say you had a lot of money up here and you were negative cash over here, so you wanted money to go from here to here. You just can't take money from this account and put it right into that account. That would not work. That's commingling. You're ignoring the form of these companies. Ideally, in most situations, you would take out a distribution to yourself and then contribute the assets over here. But you can't do that because a creditor now has a charging order on your LLC and they'll step in and take that money from you. So you've essentially tied yourself up by holding that in your own name. However, if you use this holding LLC, then you've created flexibility. So the charging order would only attach here on your membership interest in this LLC. So any money that comes out of this LLC would be subject to attachment by your creditors. But we're not going to take money out because we don't want it to go to our creditors. Now, in the exact same situation where I need money up here, I am now free to move money into this LLC up to here and move from here into here. All day long, I can be transferring money back and forth because everything above this line, my creditors cannot touch, because that holding LLC serves as a blocker. I often call it a blocker entity. It protects everything from here on up, is protected from everything down here from your personal creditors. And so this is just an example of when choosing an asset protection attorney, does that attorney understand the relationship between entities and creditors should you find yourself in a lawsuit? That's just a small piece of what we do at Andersen and how we go about our planning. So when you're selecting an asset protection attorney, be sure to ask them those very important questions I gave you at the outset, because that's going to give you some insight into their ability to address your needs. My name is Clint Coons with Andersen Business Advisors.